Welcome back. In this tutorial, we're going to cover dimensioning in a sketch. So you've seen me use dimension a little bit here. A couple different things that we can do. I'm just going to draw some quick lines here. So basically, dimension is pretty smart. It knows based off of your inputs what you're trying to dimension. So for example, if I grab this line, it knows that I need a length. And that's because that line is horizontal, so it knows that there's no angle to it. Um, and also I didn't select a second input, so let's go ahead and make this 3. Select our second line, and now if I select this first line, it will allow me to put in a dimension, and then I get this error message. Now is a good time to talk about error messages. Error messages in Inventor sometimes are pretty straightforward, and sometimes they can be a little hard to read into. So here it says, adding this dimension will over-constrain the sketch. Choose Accept to create a driven dimension. For those of you familiar with AutoCAD, you could put 1,000 dimensions on one line, and AutoCAD doesn't care. But remember, in Inventor, the dimension controls the geometry. In AutoCAD, it's the other way around. So I'm going to say cancel that. Actually, let's say accept, because it says choose accept to create a driven dimension. So we'll say accept, and now I see in parentheses 90. And so that dimension in parentheses is saying, okay, I'm going to show you what the number is, but you can't use it to drive the angle between these two. So if I dimension this line, call this 1.25, and now I've got my sizes all set up. So now if I dimension this, it's going to be a little different. So I can pick this line, and now you'll notice that when I stay close to the line, I get that little symbol next to my cursor. That's an aligned dimension symbol. And what that says is we're going to measure this along the angle. This is the true length of the line. I'm also able to do the same thing on this line. I can now derive the angle with a dimension. I can set this to be 90. Now notice that it did not set the angle of this to be horizontal. But if I rotate this, it maintains the relationship between those two of 90. So that's kind of linear dimensions, aligned dimensions, angle dimensions. If we draw a circle and I'm in a hurry and I just kind of pop it in there and say, oh, I forgot to put my dimension in for the diameter. No big deal. Dimension, click it because it's a circle. It knows that it needs a diameter. Now if I do an arc, make it a little bit bigger here, and I dimension this, it's going to give me the radius because it knows, and that's why it projected my center point down here, it knows, or projected to my center point. So I guess projected isn't the right word. It's relative to the center point. So this has a radius of 3. Okay. The other thing that Inventor will try to do is auto dimension. You're thinking, wow, this is great. I can just let it auto dimension my sketch and I'll be good. The problem comes in when you want to drive the part a certain way and it doesn't assume that. So let's go ahead and let's click automatic dimension. It says I need one dimension. That's great. I'm going to say apply and done. Now what did I get here? Well, other than a ridiculously long dimension, it gave me, if I modify this, I can see that it gave me the size of my circle here. But if you remember in the Modify Tools video, when we offset this geometry, we wanted the distance between these two to be driven so that if I change that size, let's say of our first extrusion, it will maintain that distance. So if this is an inch from center to center, 3 inches, or a mile, it will always maintain this spacing. This is not the case anymore when I do it like this. This is why I prefer not to auto dimension. So for those of you thinking, wow, this is great, it's going to do my dimensioning for me. Not so much. So it's always better to put in your own dimensions Sometimes it can help though if you want to click on this and see if you have dimensions and it says not fully constrained, then it'll tell you how many dimensions you need, so it can kind of give you a base point. But for the most part, I would say stay away from auto dimensioning. Show constraints. We'll talk more about showing and hiding constraints when we're actually talking about constraints, which will be my next video. And then down here, we can change constraint settings. Please do not change constraint settings. This is something that we will cover in the Advanced Inventor class, either in CAD 170 or CAD 271 or in Advanced Engineering at Lake Zurich. Please do not mess with the constraint settings. Just leave them how they come from the factory. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next video.